Good morning, everyone. Before we start, I'm just going to let the participants filter through, make sure we've got everyone here. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to RT7's Amazon Chargebacks and Shortages webinar. I would like to welcome back our speakers, Jack Cooper, Commercial Director, and Stephen Lloyd, Amazon Strategist. Before I hand you over, I will just go through some housekeeping. To enable you to hear the presentation clearly, everyone apart from the speaker has been placed on mute and the event is being recorded. Following the presentation, there will be a Q&A session. To enable you to put a question forward, please hover your cursor towards the bottom of the screen. A toolbar will appear, which includes the Q&A option. Select this and type your question in the box provided. I will then pose your questions at the end of the presentation. So all that is left to do is to hand you over to Jack and Stephen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajni. Great to see so many participants on the call today. Apologies for my slightly scratchy voice. I'm not going to be doing lots of talking today for once, which is good. But just to set the scene for this session today, we're looking to really give a lot of insight into our knowledge within shortages and chargebacks and the fee space, both across Vendor Central and Seller Central. So whether you're selling on either vendor or seller or both, I'm confident that there's going to be some valuable insights for you during the course of the session today. For those that don't know, RT7Digital, just a brief introduction, we're a Amazon specialist agency. We've been helping brands on Amazon for over 6 years now, and I have been a proud beta member for over 3 years. So I'm really looking forward to bringing this content to you today. Stephen, would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Also, just a brief intro of ourselves. So my name is Jack Cooper, Commercial Director. We've also got Stephen Lloyd here, who is our Amazon Strategist. Stephen has over 10 years experience managing his own Vendor Central and Seller Central account on Amazon. So well equipped to bring you through this content. What we're looking at in terms of an agenda is firstly looking at shortages and chargebacks applicable to vendors. Those that have a Vendor Central account, this will definitely be relevant to yourselves. Also, I'm looking at Amazon seller fees as well, Amazon co-ops, which are vendor-based, and then Amazon terms vendor. So there's a good mix of content that's both applicable to both selling options. And with no further ado, I'll hand over to Stephen to take us through the remaining slides.
Thanks, Jack. Okay. So starting off with the different types of recoverables. So as Jack mentioned, we've got shortages. So shortages do exist across both vendor and seller. Primarily, we find that they do occur within vendor. So a shortage is very simply where Amazon says they haven't received everything. From a vendor perspective, that could be Amazon places an order for 10 units. You confirm you're sending in 10 units, but when Amazon reconciles, they say they've only received 8 units. From a seller perspective, this would be FBA shipments where you send in your pallet of stock and Amazon just says a box is missing or part of that shipment is missing, potentially the entire shipment is missing. Both are similar exercises, slight differences in how you would process them, but fundamentally the same exercise in just proving that the delivery did happen in the way it was meant to happen. Other than that, we have chargebacks. So chargebacks is very specifically vendor. So chargebacks are for policy violations. So this could be purchase order on time accuracy, carton compliance, packaging prep, different things like that. And then we've got seller fees, so very specifically Amazon seller. So we'll be looking at both FBA fulfillment fees and the referral fees. So it applies to both FBM and FBA sellers here. And co-ops, again, very specifically vendor. So co-ops are the bolt-on agreements that go with your vendor account. And then general terms, which is again, very specifically vendor. So starting with kind of what is a shortage and a chargeback, and I'm mostly going to be focused on this side of it from a vendor standpoint. So firstly, what is a shortage? So a shortage, as I said, is where Amazon turns around and says, we haven't received everything that you've sent in. And if anybody here has a vendor account, this is something you will have seen happen quite a lot on your vendor account. And when it does happen, the way that Amazon kind of handles this is, let's say you send in 100 units and you raise an invoice for 100 units. The products turn up at Amazon and they go, well, we received 10 units. And then it reaches the point where that invoice becomes due to credit terms. So Amazon goes, well, here's your money for 10 units. And we'll credit off those additional 90 and we'll create an additional invoice. And that invoice will label as invoice number 1 SCR. And SCR just stands for shortage claim reversal. So they put a shortage claim on the first and then the reversal invoice in place for the second. What can then happen is Amazon goes, actually, no, we found another 5. And they'll create another invoice after paying off those 5, and so on and so on. And the furthest I've seen this go is having 10 instances of SCR after an invoice. And the issue that you get is sometimes that final invoice in the chain doesn't even exist. So Amazon still owes potentially 10, 20, 40, 50 units, but that final bit of paperwork isn't there, making it quite difficult to actually see within the system. So what you are able to do is actually look through all of your invoices, and if you create a consolidated list of everything that you've had, you can actually look back over multiple years and see how Amazon has paid out against invoices, where discrepancies have come in, and where there are gaps in the invoicing. So chargebacks, a little bit different, but I grouped them together for a very simple reason, which is that they are usually disputed in the same way. So most chargebacks come up for PO on time accuracy and carton compliance. There are others that exist, such as prep charges, expiries, and other things like that. But with those, they're very much like specific to those products, and usually those are much harder to overturn because they're justified by Amazon's T's and C's, whether we like them or not. Amazon does have stringent T's and C's in place, and the chargebacks are billed against those. But where it's things like PO on time accuracy, and you've got the document that says, actually, we did put this in, you'd be actually using that document when you're doing your shortage claim. So it makes sense to group shortages and chargebacks together as an exercise, if you're able to go, well, this shortage over here wasn't actually short. It did turn up. And that document that I've used to prove it, I also use for proving the chargebacks. So big difference between chargebacks and shortages, though. Shortages, you can look back over multiple years and dispute those. Chargebacks, you can only look back over the last 30 days, which makes them a bit harder to manage, and it's much more of a prevention piece, trying to manage it going forward to prevent further chargebacks coming up. There's less you can do with a recovery piece of chargebacks. So how do you find and identify these? So diving into this a bit more, with invoices, you would have to download every invoice that you've got through the account, and you would have to put these into a spreadsheet, and you'd have to do a consolidation exercise of going through and looking for what has been left on the table and where. It can be a lot of data for certain accounts, but it's the only way that you can really go through and see this is what has actually occurred and what's been left behind. And you'd have to do this on an ongoing basis, putting invoices monthly to be able to track it. Chargebacks, similar exercise, you have to pull all of these. The only thing with this is you have to do it a lot more frequently, every 2 weeks, just to be able to keep on top of it, because like I say, you only get 30 days to actually dispute them. The main exercise with chargebacks is that you actually want to be looking to perform root cause analysis to try and prevent the charges coming up again, rather than having to be disputing them every time. So the recovery process for this, shortages, whether it's vendor or seller, you need basically the same info: proof of delivery and a manifest. So what that looks like is a document that says this shipment did go in, and then a separate document that says, and this is what the shipment was. Those two documents in tandem give Amazon the full picture of what was sent, when, and how it was received. With that, if you've got all of the correct documentation, and going back in time, you'll find that some of that is harder to get due to couriers and other issues that you can get from that. But assuming you can get all of those documents, in theory, all shortages are recoverable. And if you've got all of the correct documentation, it takes a couple of weeks to get an invoice paid out. One thing to note with this is that when you raise a dispute on Amazon for a shortage, there isn't a reappeal process. So the dispute management section, when a dispute is closed on there, it is closed. You can go into case logs and raise further disputes. You can basically redispute it through a case log. You will find that that is harder. If you haven't got that first message, that first bit of paperwork right with the shortage, you'll really struggle to actually get anything pushed through with the shortage in general. So phrasing is key, being able to tell them exactly what they need to hear and having the documents there to support it. Similarly with chargebacks, the only real difference in how you dispute a chargeback is the frequency. It has to be done so quickly after the chargeback happens just to be able to have a chance of disputing it, because you've got such a tight window in terms of the dispute period. So something that you can do to help manage and ultimately try and prevent further shortages and chargebacks. You'll never get to a point where you actually have zero of both. Just to make that clear, they are always going to happen on vendor. It's just something that Amazon's system will push on you. But things that you can do to help manage it. So with shortages, making sure that you're using carriers that you're able to get full tracking info from, making sure that your own internal documents are up to scratch in terms of things like the manifest. And an interesting one is actually adjusting your case pack size. So your case pack size on vendor is effectively your minimum order quantity. So Amazon doesn't like the phrase minimum order quantity. They instead use the phrase case pack. It's kind of a deliberate effort on their part to try and get you to think they don't have an MOQ. They do, they've just labeled it differently. So the advantage of maximizing your case pack is that rather than having Amazon ordering lots of individual units to lots of different warehouses, you can group these together in more standardized shipments. The reason this helps with shortages is you would have more standardized packaging, more standardized shipments, your paperwork will become more manageable, and ultimately your shortages will be across fewer deliveries because you've grouped everything together. It won't necessarily cut down the number of units they mark as short, but it will cut down the number of different disputes that you're having to manage. Similarly with chargebacks, the thing that you're actually looking at there is actually mostly recording and tracking changes in chargebacks. So like I say, you'll get chargebacks happen on the account. The main thing that you're looking for is finding where they happen, where they haven't previously happened before, looking what's changed, trying to manage that and prevent it going forward. And if necessary, putting in disputes if Amazon has mistakenly billed them and looking at what you can do to rework stock. Similarly, case packs will also help with chargebacks because you've got standardized cartons, standardized shipments. You're going to have less breakages, less packaging issues. You'd be able to justify reworks more because you'd be able to consolidate shipments. And again, just a smaller number of shipments to have to worry about chargebacks for. So moving on to seller fees, so different space to vendor, but similar types of processes that we're looking at here. So the two main things that we're looking at in seller are the referral fee and the FBA fulfillment fee. So the referral fee is Amazon's transaction fee. That's what it really is. And it's per subcategory, they have a percentage that they bill for a sale in that category. Those fees vary quite drastically between them. I think the lowest is around 5% and the highest, which I think is for Amazon specific products like Amazon Echoes and other things like that, is about 45%. The issue that can occur is when a product is put into the wrong subcategory. And what that can mean is the wrong referral percentage is built against it. That can either happen due to a mistake on upload. It can happen due to a previous seller had listed it somewhere else, and when you come along and added it, it's just been added to that same category. Or it can be that Amazon has moved the subcategory that the product resides in. Something else that can come up with referral fee is Launchpad. So Amazon Launchpad is a bolt-on to seller. So Launchpad as a platform, some of you are probably familiar with. The idea is it gives new brands, smaller companies an opportunity to kind of launch their products into the Amazon space. The cost of doing so is 5% on all sales that happen through seller. The biggest problem with this is it's not just the sales that happen through the Launchpad platform, it's all sales on seller, regardless of whether that particular asset is actually enrolled in Launchpad. What I have seen happen is that where a company has been added to Amazon, the person who set up the account has moved on to another business, new person comes into managing the account, Launchpad is forgotten about. And companies can have Launchpad on seller and not even realize that it's still there. They don't make it massively clear that it's actually attached to the account. And like I say, it's 5% on top of your referral fee. So they don't even break out the transaction side of things. You just see an increased referral fee. There isn't a way to recover that, but what you can do is ask to be removed from Launchpad. And it'll be worth looking at, are you getting a benefit, what the total cost is, and how much that could save you. And the other thing that can happen with referral fee, and depressingly can happen with all fees on Amazon, is they make mistakes. Their system is by no means perfect, and sometimes they will just bill the wrong amounts. So FBA fulfillment fee, so two parts to this. There is the shipping and the storage. So all of this is based off dimensions and weights. The issue that comes in here is where there has been an error in entering that data in. It does happen where people just make typos, things get mismeasured, and details get given to Amazon that are incorrect. Amazon does remeasure and will look at what those dimensions are, and they update it on their side of the portal, but they don't update it for billing clients, which I think it's an obvious deliberate thing by Amazon to just try and have it so that they're able to just make more money from it, if I'm being honest. So what can be done is effectively asking Amazon to do that remeasuring exercise again, showing them what those dimensions can be, and you get two benefits from this. One is you're actually able to say to them, please update this going forward, so you're not overbilled for storage and not overbilled for the fulfillment. But the other part of it is that you can actually reclaim anything that's been overbilled. Amazon's own policies actually state you are only charged for the storage that you use. Even if you've misdeclared it, while that is your mistake, you are able to claim that back, which is also true for the shipping. So similar process for recovery to what we were looking at, the shortages and chargebacks. You need to pull data from seller, in this case your transaction report and your category listings report. That gives you the info on the things that have been charged and the categories that your products are in. The thing that you can then use to support you would be the Amazon fee calculator. So they have a calculation page in which you're able to input your dimensions, your category, your weight, and see what should be billed for a product in that area. You can then take that data, compare that to your transactions, and again, in a spreadsheet, create a list of this is what was billed, this is what should have been billed, and you do a comparison, and that comparison is what you would use for your dispute. So moving back into vendor space a second, into Amazon co-ops. So I briefly touched on this at the beginning, but an Amazon co-op, short for an Amazon cooperative agreement, is a bolt-on agreement that exists in vendor. They cover various different things, so they can be anything such as a marketing allowance, an overstock allowance, damage allowance. You can get ones that cover volume incentive rebates. I've seen one that's covered Vine before. And they're all broken down into two categories. They're either a rolling 12-month agreement, which will be a percentage of the revenue that you generate through the account, or they're a fixed fee, which is usually what you get for things like born to run costs or anything like that. For this webinar in particular, I'm focused on the rolling agreements. So these agreements are billed monthly and quarterly, and as I said, a percentage of your revenue. So two things can happen with chargebacks. The first is, again, Amazon can make mistakes. They can either bill the wrong percentage, they can bill for an agreement that hasn't yet been accepted, they can bill for an agreement that was never even created. And in those circumstances, you're able to say to Amazon, this shouldn't have been billed, these things shouldn't have happened. And there's two parts to that. One is trying to overturn those charges. The other is being able to say to them, don't bill it again. As Amazon's system is not particularly smart, if they do it once, the system probably has it in the back end to do it again later on. The other thing that can happen is actually within the co-ops that you've already agreed to, Amazon often overbills for the specific co-ops. So that could be your marketing or damage allowance. So you're able to actually get a full list of what they have billed against. And again, as a big consolidation exercise of going through and working out what should have been billed versus what has been billed. But you're able to look through and see where has Amazon been billing, what have they been billing for, and matching that to what they should have billed. So in terms of the recovery process for that, so for the erroneous charges, so where Amazon shouldn't have billed it in the first place, you have to dispute it. So dispute management section, you have to raise disputes asking them to do it and to prevent it going forward. To manage expectations here, this is a slow process. They do not like repaying these. They do not have departments that are specifically dedicated to this exercise. It takes a while, it takes patience, and it does take some very carefully worded messages to get them to look in exactly the place you need them to. For the overbilling, similarly to the previous ones, it's creating a consolidated report of where these bills have occurred and why you feel they shouldn't. And again, dialogue is key to make it so that they know exactly what you're talking about for which bit in the system. So finally, moving on to Amazon terms. So again, Amazon terms. So again, very specifically vendor. So I mentioned previously about the different allowances that you can get. So marketing allowances, overstock damage, volume incentive rebate, all of these different ones. All of these are things that Amazon can and will negotiate on. And you probably are familiar with like January, usually somewhere between January and March each year, Amazon turns around and says, we want a fee increase for this co-op, we want to put this policy in place. And usually when people hear Amazon negotiation, they think fees going up. it is possible to make fees go the other way and drop and have them lowered, depending on, of course, how high your fees are in the first place. So I'll get on to specifically like negotiation and everything in a second, but the one I actually want to focus on most in all of this is actually the early payment discount. So early payment discount, this won't be on everyone's account, but to give a brief summary of what it is. So an early payment discount exists on your primary contract. So the agreement that states this vendor code gets paid in this many days and has these returns. On that same document, you would have a section that would say Amazon can pay in 60 days, but if they pay in, say, 30 days, they get a discount. The issue with this is Amazon will always pay early. And for most companies, that extra 30 days, or I think the shortest I've ever seen it was if they paid 1 day early. For most companies, that just doesn't make a difference. Well, I don't think for any company 1 day makes a massive difference, but I don't think for most 30 days makes a massive difference. And with the fees that they're putting on there of 2 to 3%, it's quite an expensive discount to have on there. There are alternatives that personally I think are better options. One of those is C2FO. So C2FO is a separate company to Amazon. They have direct API connections that connect into Vendor Central. As an invoice becomes approved, it appears in C2FO and you are able to place an offer in to have that invoice paid early. So unlike early payment discounts, it's selective. You don't have to do it to every invoice. You're able to run it when you want to, so it doesn't have to be automatically at 30 days the invoice is paid early. You could have an invoice with 90-day payment terms. If it's approved on day 8, if it's approved with 89 days left, you can put in an offer to Amazon to pay it early. And by that, what I mean is that C2FO isn't a invoice factoring company. They are just a platform that allows you to negotiate with Amazon on a per invoice basis. And you basically say to Amazon, if you pay this invoice X days early, I will give you X discount. And Amazon says yes or no. So this allows you to selectively control your cash flow and get the money through, and you will generally get a better rate than the early payment discount. So in terms of how to negotiate with Amazon and to remove things like the early payment discount or any of the other co-ops that I was referring to, or just to generally go about your negotiations, whether this be trying to keep them from increasing fees too much or trying to lower fees in general, a few general tips to just keep in mind when doing so. The first is keep it about the customer impact. So a lot of the time I hear companies going into negotiation with Amazon and it's always a figures first business case. But ultimately all of those business cases are you want a higher margin and Amazon to have a lower one. It's not an argument that's massively compelling towards them. They want to hear customer impact. They want to hear how that's going to increase sales. They want to hear that you'll be able to launch new lines, put more money into advertising, being able to promote more products, being able to have higher stock levels to prevent out of stock, different things like that. They're more interested in your journey and where that money will be spent. So give them that outline of, let's say, if you cut my marketing budget from 10% to 5%, I can put the money into my own advertising campaigns and drive these lines, or I can launch X, or I can put Y through Born to Run. And then the two next parts to this are be prepared to take a stand and have a backup plan if you do. So by that, I mean, I actually know of one company where they wanted price increases on vendor. Amazon said no. So they said, well, we're not going to do any advertising on these listings until that is done. So they turned off all of their advertising, stopped supplying to vendor. And if you've got a seller account as a backup, you're able to keep the traction going on those listings so they don't completely tank, because as anybody's seen on Amazon, if you go out of stock, your listing just tanks. So by having that backup of seller, you're able to take a hard stand with vendor in terms of the negotiations. So you take a short-term hit for a longer-term gain, but you've got that backup plan for if vendor does go, well, I'm not going to do this. So having those two in tandem gives you a much stronger position to negotiate on all of those different things. Any questions or anything you wanted to add on that one, Jack?
No, that's excellent. Thank you, Stephen. Really, really interesting insight there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that presentation. We do actually have a few questions. So just start from the top. So for shortages, you advise phrasing is key. Messages have to be perfect. Do you have a template we could follow?
Not specifically, no. It does depend a bit on like your documentation. So we'd have to see like how your documentation was formatted. We'd have to look at the invoices in particular. So it's being able to show things like a trail across them, being able to say how the documents link together. So it is a bit specific. So I wouldn't be able to give a generic template, unfortunately.
Just to add to that as well, I mean, we have a capability to help with this in a few different capacities. Firstly, the training piece is key. We can definitely support with that, as well as actually actively pursuing these on behalf of our clients. And we have many clients that we do this for. So two prongs there that we can support with if you did want to reach out to us.
Thank you. And then there's 4 shortages in EU. No POD are accepted by Amazon since implementation of the actual VC procedure in VC.
So yes, Amazon will push that dialogue. It's not entirely true. Amazon will still use PODs, manifests, and other documents. They will often come back with that line to say that they will not actually use them. There is still things you can do even when they have tried to push that policy in place, and there are still ways to recover shortages even within that.
And do you have a procedure of the perfect POD which is really accepted by Amazon for refunds?
Ooh, perfect POD. Probably the perfect documentation you could have would be a document which would be, you usually get this with pallet shipments, where somebody from Amazon's warehouse has actually stamped that they've received it. The document would ideally have like the purchase order that was going in the first place, the shipment ID associated, and the manifest would have linking things going from the manifest to the POD.
Okay. And CF20, is there a charge to use?
Okay, so C2FO does not have a sign-up charge. There's no fee for actually signing up. The only details that you need to sign up are the email address you have associated with the account and your vendor code. You put those details in, they create the link across. There's no cost specifically for C2FO. Any money they make is effectively baked into that discount that you give. I think they make a fraction, I don't know their exact model, but I think they make a fraction of what Amazon is getting as the discount. So if you give a 2% discount to Amazon, I think they make a 0.2% of that amount just as a facilitation fee. So there's no additional cost for using them now.
Okay. And we are new to Amazon. Does Amazon still charge the referral fee or any fees if an order is cancelled?
So you have your order would be placed, your referral fee would be billed, and then when your refund happens, they would refund your referral fee.
Okay. And then is the presentation available to distribute internally? The presentation will be sent to everyone. Regarding shortages, we have a few key items that are regularly claimed as shortages. These are big ticket items that seem to go missing. How do we manage this with Amazon?
Okay, so firstly, if they've gone missing and you've got the documentation, first thing would be reviewing that, making sure you're able to put in the claims to be able to get them to pay out on that, and making sure that if you are sending in any more of them, that your paperwork is suitable if this does happen again. What I would suggest is if it's going missing on a regular basis, the first thing I'd look at is if these are specifically large items compared to a lot of the other ones that you sell, check the courier that you're using. Some couriers, especially going into Amazon, aren't great under certain circumstances and conditions. I've had issues, especially with Parcel Force trying to send anything into vendor. I've had issues with shipments going there. So if you're using a different courier for those, I'd look at the courier. Outside of that, I would look at the packaging. So is it clear to Amazon exactly what it is that they're receiving? Is it that it's a massive box with a tiny barcode that they could be potentially missing and they're just not actually knowing what the product is? So quite a few different things to really look at. You want to really look at what it is you're sending, going through like the whole process and coming up with like almost a checklist of it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, and just trying to make it nice and easy for Amazon on the reconciliation piece.
Thank you. And we've lately heard that shortages can be generated because Amazon are weighing cartons on inbound. Could this be true as opposed to scanning products? Shortages that we see lately just do not make any sense.
Okay, so two things on that. I do think that it is true that certain fulfillment centres are doing that process of weighing. I know that they have done it in other regions in the past. I've not seen anything conclusive that they're doing it UK at the moment. In regards to shortages not making sense, I fully agree with that point, to the point where I actually personally believe Amazon is malicious on this. A lot of the time, I think shortages are actually just Amazon putting a claim in almost for the sake of putting a claim in, especially when I've looked over accounts, the percentage short generally seems to have a general correlation across it. And I find it difficult to believe that there's that level of issue across accounts.
And is there a way to stop Amazon from trying to claim on Amazon? Sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. ASINs,
ASINs,
ASINs that we no longer supply?
I'm going to need clarity on that question. Do they mean chargebacks, or I'll have
sorry, we can
Amazon?
move on if they can.
Yeah.
If you have a question, just say what you need further info on, Stephen, and then hopefully they can.
Yeah, just if is that chargebacks? Is that they're being billed? What specifically they're being billed for in those ASINs?
And does Amazon need to approve a license plate implementation, or can we simply change the labeling?
License plate. Not sure what that question is in regards to. Sorry.
Okay. And does RT7Digital provide a service to support with everything you have covered today?
I can take this one. Yeah, so we've, as I think I touched on, we offer a service where we actually actively recover shortages and chargebacks for our clients. It's a no-win, no-fee arrangement. So we would take a percentage off of anything that we did successfully recover. And depending on where you store PODs, manifests, etc., we can maybe access those through a portal. We would need your inputs to share certain information with us, but we've actually had a lot of success disputing and appealing claims that have already been rejected. So even if this is something you're actively managing, feel free to reach out to us, and we can even just go after the ones that you failed to recover thus far, because we have a custom built in-house tool that we use to support. So we do have some tips and tricks that we use internally to try and bypass and get wins for our clients.
Thank you. And just there's a follow-up, Stephen, on the license plate question.
Sure.
License plate equals SSCC?
Oh, so this is for Carrier Central, I'm assuming. So this is is it SCAC, did you say?
It's just saying SSCC.
Oh,
It's the Amazon labeling, apparently.
yeah. Oh, you should just be able to update that. You can raise a case log to do so, I believe, unless anything's changed on that since I last looked.
Okay.
Last looked.
And across the accounts, you have looked at what percentage of orders usually have shortages. How much money is being lost here?
It's a good question. It does fluctuate over various years. You usually find that there's a settling in period for companies where the percentage is a bit higher when they're getting used to working with Amazon, and then it tends to settle after that. And looking back over 5 years, it averages around 2% to just over 2% of all revenue on the account.
Okay, brilliant. I think that's all of the questions. Just give it a minute, see if anyone else wants to ask anything. Oh, here we go, one more. Someone's just said we would need a perfect procedure for the perfect POD for non-pallets, so parcels, etc.
Ideally, yes. So phrasing is more important in many ways than having the perfect paper. If you have the perfect paperwork and the perfect case written out, 9 times out of 10 you will get the dispute through first time. I say 9 times out of 10 because sometimes Amazon will deny for the sake of denying. But even without those things, it is possible to still get a dispute approved. It just becomes harder. Your success rate will be lower.
I mean, we've seen success without a POD, for instance.
Okay, brilliant. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. The presentation and speaker contact details will be shared with you this week. And coming up tomorrow, we have MMP Living. They'll be presenting their webinar on Amazon and marketplace opportunities in the USA. All event details can be found on our website. Thank you so much, Jack and Stephen, for today. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.